Mr. Durst is present, Mr. Chesnut, and our jurors and alternates have returned. Mr. Miata, you were...
Yes, Your Honor. Although it appeared that Klaus Dillmann was concluded on September 29, 2003, he was briefly recalled. It's about 5 minutes of additional testimony, so that's where we're gonna resume.
All right, you may resume the testimony.
You may be seated, Mr. Dillmann. You're still under the same oath you were under the other day, okay?
All right.
You may be seated too. You may proceed.
Mr. Dillmann, I have asked the court's permission to recall you for a further cross-examination to clear up what I believe is a little bit of confusion about your testimony from last week regarding the phone call that you got from a man that sounded like the relative or brother-in-law of Dorothy Siner, who you believe is Mr. Durst. It's true, isn't it, that you got that phone call August the 28th or 29th, not in September or October?
I only remember that for certain that I received a phone call just about right after. I don't know. I couldn't swear to which exactly day, 2 or 3 days later, somewhere around in there.
2 or 3 days after?
But not a month later, 2 or 3 days later.
2 or 3 days after you got the check, the last check from Morris Black, correct?
That's what I remember.
Okay, and so to be real sure about that, I have isolated here in State's Exhibit 150 a true copy of the last check. Not a money order, but the last check you got from Morris Black. It's a check that's dated August the 28th, 01, correct?
Correct.
And your deposit slip is right below that on the same page. It's dated August the 31st, right?
Correct.
And the phone call you got from the man you think is probably Mr. Durst, it sounded like a relative, was a few days after that check. After you got that check, that's correct, isn't it?
That's correct.
And here is a calendar for 2001 showing the 29th, 30th, and 31st of August, 2001. Somewhere in those days is when you got the check, and then you got the phone call, right?
I know after I received the last check from Mr. Black, I received a call, and I was surprised when I heard that Mr. Durst was commenting on knowing that the apartment was for lease, and he was interested in speaking in the name of Miss Siner to rent it for a friend from up north.
Right.
That's why I remember it was right after the last check I received from Mr. Black.
Okay, the confusion was when you testified last week, you thought it was after the body had been found. But it was a month before that, wasn't it? 2 months, excuse me. A month.
I don't think I knew anything about a body at the time.
Another lawyer. Exactly. Thank you. Pass the witness.
Any questions?
Yes, Your Honor, if I might. Mr. Dillmann, and I'm not picking on you or anything, but when you testified previously on cross-examination, you were asked about the phone call, and you twice indicated that it was around the end of September on 2 different questions from Mr. DeGuerin, asked you, and you once answered somewhere around the end of September, and then you answered a second time. I think it was more like in September. Did you have an opportunity to review something different prior to today to make a change?
I was assuming it simply because I was told. I don't know if you were saying it, but somebody was saying it, that it was money order sent to me from Mr. Black.
Did you receive a money order from Mr. Black or not?
I don't remember anymore.
Okay.
The bank don't have it. I don't have it.
We can show it to you. It's been admitted, but you were just on confusing check with money order.
Correct.
Okay.
See, when Miss Siner sent me the money orders, they were always several of them because they were a certain amount of money order you can get. Then you have to get sometimes 2 or 3 money orders if you make an amount up to $800. So maybe that was the confusing part when y'all showed it to me, and there was $300 that was the check from Mr. Black. Who would know best? I don't remember.
When we went down and got your money records that we previously shown you when you testified, the triggering event was just remembering it was Morris Black's check. And you got the call after that. Was that right?
That's correct. That's the triggering effect. That's what I remember exactly. It was right after. I said, why is he calling again?
And you are clear in your mind, at least today, that it was a check he had written on. It wasn't a cashier's check.
No, it wasn't a cashier's check. I don't remember if it was a cashier's check. I thought it was a check, the last check I had gotten from him.
Neither one of us want to suggest anything or put words in your mouth. But are you really comfortable today, in your testimony from Mr. DeGuerin, that it was after you received a cashier's check, or after you received a written check from Morris Black, or do you know for certain? Let me ask it that way.
Nothing is so certain in this life, but I do know it gets confusing sometimes when you said you have one thing and you have another thing, and then you are telling me you have the phone records of my home, and it's not a fact that you do have it. And I said, well, why don't you check the phone record? You will know exact time when he called.
And we are checking the phone records. We have gone to the court and asked for a court order to get some more phone records, okay?
I cannot swear to anything I am not sure of.
And we don't want you to. That's all.
Then you get my answer.
Okay. All right, I will ask you once again then. After the check, you received that check on which date then? What was your testimony? August? The deposit date was?
I was told the last time I was here. I am not good in dates, and I didn't think it was my responsibility to be good in dates because I am not a defendant here.
Yes, sir.
What I was giving you, to the best of my recollection, what I thought at the time.
Okay. And you agree your testimony you gave Mr. DeGuerin on your deposit date was accurate, right?
Unless you have other records that show me I am mistaken.
Not at all, Mr. Dillmann. Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dillmann. Sorry we had to get you back down here.
Please introduce the next
Yes, Your
section.
Honor. First, as a housekeeping matter, we do have exhibits that we need to identify for purposes of Mr. Dillmann's Galveston testimony. We have a two-page exhibit stipulation sheet, which I'd like to mark as People's 185. And we have, well, first of all, there are a few exhibits that were mentioned that neither the prosecution or the defense have. Those are the original lease agreements, which were identified as States Exhibits 1 and 2, as well as the defense diagram and scale model, which were identified as Defense Exhibits 7 and 8. So those we do not have.
And is the absence of those exhibits noted in People's 185?
It is not.
All right, well, the jury can just take note of that those exhibits just aren't available any longer.
States Exhibit 3, which was referenced in the transcript, will now be People's 185A. It's a one-page document, a letter. What was identified as States Exhibit 4, it's another one-page letter, is now People's 185B. What was identified as States Exhibit 5, a one-page letter, is now 185C. And what was identified as States 150, which is 331 pages containing bank records of Klaus Dillmann, that'll now be People's 185D. And the next witness, Your Honor, is going to be the Galveston testimony of Michael Ogden.
Before we do that,
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, there's a stipulation.
it's only a few sentences. What is the next exhibit?
186.
Okay, may I mark this as People's 186?
Yeah.
Original stipulation 29.
Okay.
Will you stipulate as follows? Dorothy Steiner knew defendant Robert Durst because they were classmates at Scarsdale High School in New York in 1957. Ms. Steiner has never been to Galveston, Texas, has never given defendant permission to use her identity, and had no knowledge that he ever did. She never signed any rental contract to rent any apartment at 2213 Avenue K in Galveston. She also does not know Klaus Dillmann and never signed or purchased any money orders payable to Klaus Dillmann. Nor did she ever author any notes or letters to Klaus Dillmann.
So stipulated?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so for Michael Ogden, Your Honor, we have his testimony from October 7th of 2003. The original prosecutor, Kirk Sistrunk, that portion will be read by Benjamin Hariri. Michael Ogden's testimony will be read by Wendy Pham. Mr. Chesnoff is now going to channel Chip Lewis. And because it's a short transcript,
I'm going to buff up here.
since it's a short transcript, we're going to ask the prosecutor, Benjamin Hariri, to read the portion of Judge Susan Chris and just identify that portion before.
All right.
You guys come up? I'm sorry, it was Mr. Joel Bennett was the prosecutor, not Mr. Sistrunk. Thank you.
I'm as Mr. Bennett and as the court. Mr. Bennett says,
Okay, you'll need to really project.
That's
That microphone goes, yes, you have to actually project with your lungs and your diaphragm.
Michael Ogden, and as the court, you may be seated. And I'm going to be continuing as Mr. Bennett. May I proceed, Your Honor? Response.
You probably still need to speak up even louder. Really loud.
Okay. Yes. Michael Ogden, having first been duly sworn, testified as follows. Direct examination. Please state your name for the record.
Michael Ogden,
And where do you live?
New Orleans, Louisiana.
And do you run a business there? What's your occupation?
I own a construction company and I also have property that I rent and lease.
Referring you back to March of 2001, did you have an apartment for lease in New Orleans?
I did.
And were you contacted by anybody about renting that apartment?
Yes, I was.
How were you contacted?
By phone.
Who contacted you?
The gentleman on the other end of the phone said that he was an assistant to the mute and was I open to renting my apartment to a handicapped woman approximately 50 years of age that was looking for an apartment in the area.
And how did you respond?
That of course I had no problem with that.
Your Honor, can we just inquire if the jury can hear? I'm a bad test. I can't hear.
I think just to be safe, if you'll speak directly into that microphone, you can pick that microphone up and move it closer to you.
Okay.
Also, still more volume in the
Right, you
prosecutor.
can tip that microphone up.
This one?
Bend it.
Okay.
And pick it up and put it closer to you. Because you look at the jury, right, and read it to them while the microphone is near your mouth.
And how did you respond?
That of course I had no problem with that.
And did that person identify himself on the phone, give you a name?
I believe at that time they did say that the name was James or Jim Cortez.
What apartment did you have for lease at that point?
I had an apartment on General Pershing Street in New Orleans. The address is 2837 A General Pershing.
And what did this phone call continue after you told him you didn't have a problem with renting in a mute?
He asked if 2 o'clock would be okay for an appointment with a lady that would like the apartment, the mute woman. And I said, no problem. I was there at 2 o'clock and so was she.
At 2 o'clock on, do you remember what day?
2 o'clock that afternoon.
Do you remember what day it was?
No, I believe it was around the 19th.
Do you have a copy of your statement with you?
Yes, I do.
If you need to, you can refer to it to assist you in your testimony.
On the statement, I say March 19th, and I'm pretty sure that was the day.
And once you met at 2 o'clock on March 19th of 2001, what transpired there with the mute woman?
I met a mute woman there by the name of Diane Wynn. She communicated with me by writing on a legal pad, asked questions about the neighborhood. We looked at the apartment, what day the trash was picked up, what the neighborhood was like, and would I mind if she had an alarm installed, and then proceeded to tell me that she would like to rent the apartment.
Did you execute a lease on that day?
I did.
May I approach, Your Honor? Court responds, yes. Let me show you what's been marked for identification as States 175. Do you recognize this?
Yes, I do.
Is this a copy of the lease that you executed on that day?
It is.
Offer States 157 and tender to opposing counsel.
No objection, Your Honor.
Court response, it's admitted. On the top of States 175, what's the date that's noted there?
The 1st of April.
And the parties?
Myself and Diane Wynn.
And the address?
2837 General Pershing, A.
In New Orleans.
New Orleans, Louisiana.
And what was the start date of this lease?
April 1st, 2001.
And it was for a term of what?
1 year.
So it would go through March 30th of 2002.
That is correct.
And the rent for the apartment?
The rent for the apartment was $650. It says $750 reduction if the rent is paid on or before the 1st of the month. So in other words, I do things differently. I don't put a late fee. I give a deduction in rent if it's paid on time.
And then on the second page, did you witness Miss Wynn sign?
That is correct, yes.
And it was also dated March 19th?
That is correct.
When you met Miss Wynn, did you notice anything that you thought was unusual?
Well, yes. It was clear that Miss Wynn was a man.
And what was Miss Wynn wearing?
A pair of bell-bottom blue jeans and some sort of blouse, a mousy brown wig, and I believe tennis shoes, some lipstick.
Anything that is the only time that you met the person holding themselves out to be Diane Wynn?
That is correct.
Had you ever met or did you ever have any contact again with this Jim Cordes or James Cordes?
I left a note on the door on the 2nd day of October. It was very strange that the rent would be late. I left a note on the door, you know. I don't remember what it said. Probably, is there any problem, etc. and so forth. I believe on the 7th or maybe the 3rd, I got a phone call from the assistant to the mute again, Mr. Cordes, telling me that the rent would be in my mailbox shortly, and the following day, I believe it was.
After you received the rent, what was the next contact you had about this apartment?
I received a note in my mailbox on or before the 10th of October stating that her plans had changed, that she was leaving New Orleans suddenly, and that please keep the furniture in the apartment in lieu of breaking the lease.
May I approach, Your Honor? The court responds, yes. Let me show you what's marked for identification as States 176. Do you recognize this?
Yes, I do.
Is that a copy of the note that you received?
Yes, it is.
I offer States 176.
No objection, Your Honor.
The court responds, admitted. If you would, read the note into the record, please.
Michael Ogden, my plans have changed suddenly, and I'm leaving New Orleans. I will not be back. Please keep furniture as payment, sort of, for breaking the lease. Diane Wynn.
Your Honor, the state would offer what's been marked as States 174. These are certified copies of business records filed by the defense in this case.
No objection.
The court responds, admitted. Mr. Ogden, let me show you what's been admitted as States 174. On the 3rd page here, what's the name on these records or on these phone records?
James Cordes.
Is that the same name as the assistant that called you?
That is correct.
And for what address?
Apartment A, 2837 General Pershing Street, New Orleans, Louisiana, 70115.
And this is the apartment that you leased to Diane Wynn?
That is correct.
After you received the note, did you go into the apartment?
Yes, I did.
Were there still, as the note says, some things left in the apartment?
The apartment was strange in ways. There was, just enough to survive. There was bed, sheets, one towel, one piece of soap, just a few cooking utensils, a pot, a pan, and so on. But yes, it was an apartment that looked like it had been furnished quickly.
But there were some other items that were left in there besides furniture.
That's true.
May I approach, Your Honor? Court responds, yes. Let me show you what's been marked for identification as States 88. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
Is that one of the items that was left in the apartment?
Yes, it is.
Let me show you what's been marked for identification as States 89. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
Is that one of the things that was left in the apartment?
Yes, it is.
Did you turn these over to the Galveston Police Department?
Yes, I did.
And who did you turn them over to?
Detective Cody, I believe that's correct. I don't know if that's his first or last name, but
Cody Cazales. Sound familiar?
That sounds very familiar. That's correct.
A tall guy with the burr haircut?
That's correct.
How did it come to you that you were in contact with Cody?
I called the police department.
Why did you call the Galveston Police Department?
Well, I was on vacation, and after I had rented this apartment, I had spoken to my mother and explained that, it was unusual that I would rent this apartment to this Diane Wynn. And, after a comical conversation, we just let it go. I was on vacation and received a phone call from her saying that, when you have a chance, please go pick up a People's Magazine. I think it's the person that rented the apartment from you.
Did you look at the People's Magazine?
I certainly did.
Did you see a picture in there?
I did.
Did you recognize that person as anybody you had dealt with?
It was Diane Wynn, less the wig.
And you see that person in the courtroom today?
Yes, I do.
Would you please point out to him and tell me what he is wearing?
He is wearing a navy jacket and a blue shirt.
May the record reflect that he has identified the defendant. The court responds, it will. Other than giving a statement, would that conclude your involvement with the case?
I believe so.
No further questions. The court responds, all right, you may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon.
How are you?
Good. How about you?
Good.
How do you like Galveston?
It's very nice, thank you.
I want to show you what's been marked for identification as Defendants Exhibit 35 and 36 and ask you, Mr. Ogden, if you recognize those.
I do. This is the apartment, the front door of the apartment.
And 36, Defendants 36?
That's a picture of the house.
Okay. And is that basically a fair and accurate depiction of how the house looked on March of the 19th of 2001?
It looks like that today.
I would offer Defendants 35 and 36 and tender to Mr. Bennett, Your Honor.
No objection.
Court said it's admitted. May I show the jury, Your Honor? Court says yes. When did you take over this place on General Pershing?
Probably a year, I'm guessing. But I would say a year before I rented it to Diane Wynn. It's a rough guesstimate as to when I purchased that house.
And you are pretty familiar with the area?
Very.
Are you familiar with what's depicted in Defendants Exhibit 37?
I know exactly where this is. I do business here myself.
Does it fairly and accurately depict the location in the picture?
Absolutely. It looks just like that today.
We would offer Defendants Exhibit 37, Your Honor.
No objection.
It's admitted. Mr. Ogden, would you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what is depicted in Defendants 37?
It's a picture of Parcels and Posts, which is a business in the uptown area of New Orleans that provides private mailboxes and ships and receives packages. It sells wrapping paper and cards and stuff.
A place that would be capable of sending a FedEx package?
Absolutely.
Now, how long have you been in Louisiana?
For 42 years, all my life.
You're pretty familiar with New Orleans?
Very.
You didn't have any problem figuring out that Diane Wynn was not a woman?
I had no problem figuring out that Diane was not a woman.
And that didn't pose any problems to you as far as whether you're going to rent this apartment or anything like that?
I live in New Orleans.
The brief interaction you had with both Diane Wynn and Mr. Cortez, is it fair to say they were pleasant?
Yeah.
Ms. Wynn was polite when she wrote you and spoke to her.
Yes.
Mr. Cortez was polite and responsive at any requests you might have had.
Yes.
All in all, before you received this note, I'm so sorry, everybody. Before you received this note, you would say Miss Wynn was a pretty good tenant.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Ogden. Court says anything else?
Nothing else, Your Honor.
All right, sir, you may be excused. Thank you. You might have to find a new defense lawyer.
All right, is this, Mr. Miata, was that courts, are these labeled sequentially? So that would be courts 8?
Yeah, so we haven't actually marked it yet, but yes, this would be courts 8. The transcript would be courts 8. And we have a 2-page stipulation sheet for this testimony, which we'd like marked for identification as People's 187 next in order. And we have what was referenced in the transcript that states 174. That'll be now People's 187A. It's a 5-page document. We have what was referenced as states 175. That's a 2-page document, which will now be People's 187B. We had what was referenced as states 176, a 1-page handwritten note, which will now be People's 187C. We have defense 35, it's a 1-page photograph, which is now People's 187D. Defense 36, a 1-page photograph, which is now People's 187E. And we have defense 37, a 1-page photograph, which is now People's 187F. And again, there was reference to People's 88 and 89, which are exhibits that the people and the defense do not have.
All right, thank you. Now you have another short transcript, which is going to be courts 9.
Yes, that's going to be for Ted Hanley. And that's going to be, the transcript is marked as courts 9. And for that we have the testimony of Ted Hanley, which was given in Galveston on October 13th, 2003. The part of the prosecutor, Kirk Sistrunk, will be read by Michelle Cornelius. Ted Hanley's testimony will be read by Cameron Young, and the prosecutor, Cameron Young, to read the portions of the court, if any. If you guys can come up.
Do you want a law student designated as defense lawyer? You don't
I'll
have
give
to
it
read
a, I'll give it a word. I'm okay, Your Honor.
No.
I don't know if it's a heat or something. Does the clerk have a tissue?
The court did have tissue.
Oh, I got some here.
Get over to this.
Hammond?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. No, she's the prosecutor.
And do bring the microphone near. And tip it up towards your mouth, speak right into it. It's okay for your observer to make sure you've got that near you. That's good.
It's not indicated here in the transcript, but I believe this is the court saying, you can call your next witness. Mr. Sistruck, the state calls Ted Hanley. Ted Hanley was called as a witness by the state, and having first duly sworn, assumed the witness stand, and upon examination testifies as follows. Sir, would you please state your full name for the record, please?
Ted Hanley.
And how are you employed?
I am the executive director of the Jesse Tree, a nonprofit organization here in Galveston.
And what type of activities is the Jesse Tree involved in?
It's a faith-based organization that coordinates assistance for people that are uninsured or poor.
And the clientele that you serve, then, any particular city, or are you limited to or location or all of Galveston County?
Galveston County and Brazoria County.
How long has your organization been in existence?
Since 1995.
Is this a family-run business, or how is this thing operated?
I use my family as volunteers, but this is a nonprofit 501c3 corporation.
I'm showing you what's been introduced as Defendant's Exhibit 19. Do you recognize this individual?
Yes, I do.
Okay,
Yes, I do.
And who do you know this to be?
Morris Black.
Can you tell us, please, how you came to be introduced to Morris Black?
One of the outreach programs of the Jesse Tree is a Saturday morning outreach to the homeless population, and I met Mr. Black when he approached me one Sunday morning to recommend that I look into purchasing reading glasses from a website that he had found to be able to provide eyeglasses for poor people.
Let me interrupt you there. Do you have any real recollection about what time frame we are talking about? What year this might have been, or month?
I met him in January of 2001.
And how soon after that initial meeting did he come to you with the eyeglass program?
Well, I saw him every Saturday morning, and he had approached me sometime in January, and we met and discussed the idea several times between January and March.
Let me ask you, we will come back to the eyeglass program, but how long of a time frame did you know him then from January 2001 up until when?
Until he died.
Did you feel like you got to know him pretty well or not?
I did.
Did Mr. Black seem to have purpose in his dealings with you?
In our dealings, he was very focused. He wanted to do something to help poor people in the community and was very interested in pursuing the idea of providing these reading glasses to people who couldn't afford them.
At least in your dealings with him personally, did you know him to have a quick temper or a lot of patience?
I got to know him quite well, and I observed him having a quick temper on a number of occasions, but I also got to know him well enough to know that he also had a good sense of humor, and he was very opinionated, but he was also very concerned about the community and about the people he wanted to help.
Let me ask you regarding his physical attributes. How did he appear to you physically?
He was always dressed casually, relaxed. He usually wore walking shorts and a hat, like a fishing hat, kind of very casual.
How about his physical health? How did he appear to you? Physically fit or someone who is not physically fit? Muscle tone, no muscle tone, those kinds of things?
I regarded him as an elderly person, a retired person. He walked quite a bit, but there were 2 occasions in the time that I knew him where he actually appeared not to feel well. And I actually talked to him and asked him whether he felt well because he was leaning against a building and seemed not to be feeling well.
These 2 occasions that you remember seeing him, I guess, not feeling well, or what you were accustomed to, do you remember what months those might have been?
I believe the first time was in the late spring of 2001, and the second time was during the summer of 2001.
Back to the eyeglasses that you mentioned earlier. Did he initially seek out your help? Is that your testimony?
Yes, he approached me and showed me a printout. He apparently did research on the communities at the Rosenberg Library, and he showed me that he had discovered how to purchase these reading glasses in bulk, and he wanted me to use some of the money from the Jesse Tree to purchase the glasses. And even though it looked like a really good deal, I just didn't have that kind of cash. It was somewhere around $5,000 to purchase the glasses in bulk. I talked to him, and told him without having seen the product, I really wouldn't want to spend donors' money on something that I hadn't seen. And at that time, he told me he had approached the people at Our Daily Bread.
Once you answer the question I ask you, it's time to stop, okay? If there's something else to be said, both of us will have an opportunity to re-ask you questions, okay?
Okay.
All right. Did you make a decision to participate in the eyeglasses venture or not?
I didn't invest anything in it.
Do you have personal knowledge as to whether or not Mr. Black actually followed through on those plans to get those glasses?
Yes, he came and then showed me some of the glasses that he had purchased.
Were you involved in any way with the distribution of those glasses?
Yes, on Saturday morning he joined with the group that I work with to provide medical care for the homeless, and he distributed glasses while people lined up to see medical people.
And do you remember the name of that group that you are referring to?
It's the Luke Society Medical Mission Group.
So did you actually see him passing out glasses then?
Yes.
Did you have any concerns about his behavior at certain times when he's passing these glasses out? Did you see anything that caused you concern?
Just one time.
Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what you saw the one time?
He'd given somebody a pair of glasses. It says paper here.
If we agreed, we could repair it.
He'd given somebody a pair of glasses, and then when the person took out a pack of cigarettes, he asked for the glasses back. Said if a person had money to buy cigarettes, they should buy their own glasses. And he argued with the person.
Is it a verbal argument or a physical argument that you witnessed?
Verbal.
Do you remember any other places around town that you might see him, or are there other places that you might see him?
I saw him frequently around town. He walked, and I would see him walking downtown. He frequently visited the Jesse Tree, and I saw him at other medical service events, or social service events.
And in the city of Galveston, where is the Jesse Tree located?
2622 Market Street.
For those of us who might not live in Galveston, is that anywhere close, though, 2213 Avenue K?
It's walking distance.
When you would see him out and about town, do you recall seeing him with any other individuals?
No.
Would you characterize him as one to be alone, or did he have a lot of friends?
I always saw him alone.
Do you remember how long this eyeglass project lasted that he started?
Probably 3 months.
Did he donate any of the glasses to your organization?
Yes.
Do you still have some?
Yes.
How many glasses are we talking about?
Close to 5,000 pairs.
Again, without saying whatever specifically he might have said, did he ever share with you any personal concerns about his health or anything else? That's a yes or no.
Yes.
Okay. At some point, well, do you have a personal recollection as to when the eyeglass project ended? What month?
In about May of 2001, he donated the remaining glasses to the Jesse Tree so that could be distributed there.
And again, that program started, to your recollection, in January?
No, in about March.
In about March, okay. At that point in March, this program ended in May. Did you still consider yourself someone who knew him pretty well?
Yes, I continued to see him every Saturday. He still continued to visit the clinic on Saturday morning.
Did you note any change in his demeanor? Again, without saying anything he might have told you, did you note any change in his demeanor after that eyeglass project that ended?
Not in particular.
Okay. Did you at any time counsel with him on any issues, again, without saying what the issues might have? But did you counsel him on any issues?
The 2 times that I saw him, he appeared to be ill. He told me that.
Not what he said.
I told him.
What did you instruct him?
I told him I thought I could find somebody that would counsel him and could help him.
Okay. And what type of person were you trying to find for him?
I thought either counselor or minister or someone that he could talk to.
Can you recall with any recollection what month that might have been in 2001?
Late spring 2001 and early August.
Other than the eyeglasses, did Morris Black ever come to you again with any other type of project or offer any type of assistance?
Yes, he approached me because he had read in the paper that the Jesse Tree was interested in buying a building and told me that he knew someone who might be able to make a loan to the Jesse Tree.
Did he ever give you a name of this individual that he thought could help you out?
No.
Are we talking about an 8x8 storage bin that you could buy at a hardware store, or are you talking about a huge building? What were you looking for?
We were looking at a building, a couple $100 building.
Did you take Mr. Black seriously when he told you he knew somebody that might help you out?
I told him if someone was interested in helping the Jesse Tree, they should contact me in my office.
Do you remember receiving a visit from someone soon thereafter that made you think back to this conversation with Morris?
Yes.
And how long after that conversation with Mr. Black did you have a visit from an individual?
Within 2 weeks.
And would you describe that person for us that came? I guess you tell us, where did they come to visit you, with you?
A person had visited the Jesse Tree who had told us...
Please listen to my question. Where did the person come and visit you within 2 weeks after speaking with Morris Black? What location?
At the Jesse Tree.
Okay. Do you know if that person asked for you specifically or not?
No.
Did you have an opportunity to speak to that person?
Yes, I did.
Was it, a male or a female?
A male.
And how would you describe that person's physical appearance?
Disheveled and kind of appeared like a homeless person and presented himself as mute.
Did you try to talk to that person as a mute then?
I did.
And how did you try to communicate with that person?
With American Sign Language.
And what response did you get when you started using American Sign Language?
I spoke and asked, "Are you deaf?" And the person shook his head and motioned to step into our resource room.
Were you able to communicate with this person in another area of the building?
Yes, we sat in the resource room and talked.
Do you recall whether or not that person had on any glasses?
He was wearing glasses that had wide adhesive tape over them.
And when you say over them, what areas of the glasses had wide adhesive tape over them?
Over both of the lenses, obscuring the eyes.
Not just wrapped around the frame, but fully over the lens itself?
Uh-huh.
Is that a yes, sir?
Yes.
I'm sorry, we have to say yes or no for the record.
Yes.
Did the person identify himself?
No.
Did you ever at any point recognize this individual? Had this person ever been to your Jesse Tree before that you recall?
No.
Did you at some point later recognize the person as being the one who had visited you?
When I saw a photograph after Mr. Durst was arrested, and I read in the article about his having said he was mute,
So, okay, Mr. Hanley, I'm sorry. Did you later at some point recognize the individual as having been the same one that visited you?
yes.
Okay. And when did that occur?
When I saw a picture of Mr. Durst in the newspaper.
And when you refer to Mr. Durst, are you referring to the man seated in my left in the blue sports jacket?
Yes.
May the record reflect the witness has identified the defendant. The court says it will.
No objection.
Was there any offer of support for your building?
No.
Was it a pleasant meeting or an unpleasant meeting that you had with Mr. Durst?
It was an unpleasant meeting.
Pass the witness.
Mr. Hanley, I take it since you met Morris Black in connection with this eyeglass deal, you knew him from approximately January 2001 until the late summer of 2001.
Yes.
So a period of about 7 or 8 months, is that right?
Yes.
And the last time you saw him, you have a recollection of when that was? Was it in August of 2001?
It was in August.
And that's when you counseled him and told him someone for him to go see for his problems.
I suggested that he let me.
Is this when you counseled him?
Yes.
And did you have the name of someone to go see?
No, he's not interested in talking.
I didn't ask you what he was interested in. Did you have a name of someone you suggested to him?
No.
You don't know whether he went to see that person or not, or anybody that you suggested?
No.
So what I'm hearing is you didn't suggest a person, you just said he needed to go get some counseling.
I asked him if he would be interested in counseling.
Is that the conversation in which you told him that people at the Jesse Tree had wanted to call the police on him?
No.
That happened earlier?
Yes.
And so we can be clear about it, it had been reported to you that he had created such a disturbance at the Jesse Tree that your people, the receptionists there, wanted to call the police.
Yes.
Right?
That was the same. Oh, I'm sorry.
That was the same Morris Black that had offered these glasses to the homeless, right?
Yes.
Now, about those glasses to the homeless, before we get back to the receptionist who wanted to call the police on him, you actually saw him passing out glasses from time to time, right?
Yes.
And it was did you go down to the Salvation Army here on Broadway and 23rd? Is that where that happened?
No.
Did you ever see him there at the Salvation Army? You know where the people hand out at Salvation Army?
Yes.
Did you ever see him there?
Yes.
Was he passing out glasses there?
Not when I saw him.
The time that you saw him pass out glasses, whenever he would see someone with cigarettes, or someone drinking for that matter, someone with a beer, he'd take the glasses back. Is that right?
One time I saw that.
Well, when you wrote out your statement for the police, you mentioned that he would take the glasses back if a person smoked, or if the person drank, or if the person wasn't grateful enough. That's what you told the police, wasn't it? Is that what you told the police?
I told them that when he donated the glasses, his instructions were that he wanted them to be given to people in need, not to people who could afford them such as, and I think he said loafers, people who drink and people who smoked.
No, smokers, drinkers, or freeloaders should get glasses, right? That's the way you put your words.
Right. Well, those were his words to me.
Well, and that's the way you described it to the police, correct?
Right.
And when you consider that usually homeless people that hang out at the Salvation Army, some people might call them freeloaders, might they?
Some people might.
Sure, you wouldn't because your life is dedicated to helping people in need, right?
Yes.
And the word freeloader didn't come from you. It came from Morris Black, who you passed on to, or the words you passed on to the police.
Right.
But so if we have an understanding then of what was going on, Morris Black would take these glasses down to people that looked like they were homeless or needed glasses. But if he thought they were freeloaders, or smoked, or drank, then he would take the glasses back. Is that what you said?
I just saw that happen one time.
Well, were his instructions not to let smokers, drinkers, or freeloaders have the glasses?
Yes, he wanted us to screen people.
Okay. Also, if someone asked him for more than one pair, he would refuse to give them even one pair, right?
I didn't see that.
Well, did you write in your statement when someone asked for 2 pairs of glasses, he would refuse to give them 1 pair?
I don't recall.
Have you read your statement that you gave to the police before you testified here today?
Yes.
In fact, did you read it just a little while ago?
I just glanced at it.
Okay, that's in your statement, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so the way you understood it, he would offer a pair of glasses to someone that looked homeless, but if they asked for 2 pairs of glasses, he wasn't giving them 1.
I didn't observe that.
They were your words.
Oh, okay.
You understood that to be his rule.
That may have been part of his instructions to me.
Well, would he get angry if he thought someone was trying to take advantage of his free glass product?
Yes.
And he didn't take much to get him angry, did it?
No.
In fact, you would characterize him as having a short fuse, wouldn't you?
Yes.
On one occasion, didn't you observe Morris Black throwing a fit when he thought someone had stolen his sack of glasses?
Yes, he was very upset.
Screaming and cussing and so forth.
Not cursing, but he was very upset and demanding. He thought somebody had taken a bag of the glasses.
And he was just raising Cain, using a nice word with the folks around, accusing people of stealing the glasses, right?
He was looking for the bag, and he thought somebody might have taken them, but he had dropped them.
Right. But so the jury can understand it wasn't just, well, now I wonder where those glasses went. Did you take them? It was a bad scene, wasn't it?
It was.
Until a child walked up to him and said, "Sir, are these yours?"
Uh-huh.
Right?
Yes.
Now, Morris Black could be pretty abrupt with people, couldn't he?
Yes, sir.
Pretty short with people.
Yes.
And he had a habit of repeating himself time after time after time, correct?
Yes.
And that could be pretty irritating, couldn't it?
Yes.
I realize probably your patient goes a lot farther than a lot of people just from your good works that you do, but there were people that would become very upset with the way Morris would treat them. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And he didn't seem to have any fear on the size of the people that he would pick arguments with. I mean, he would pick an argument with a fellow twice his size, wouldn't he?
I didn't ever observe that.
You did observe that he walked. You would see him all over Galveston, wouldn't you?
Yes.
And you noticed that because you knew who he was and recognized him if you saw him on the seawall or someplace else walking around Galveston.
Yes, sir.
And it's true, isn't it, that you would see him all over Galveston.
Yes.
And he seemed to walk at a brisk pace, even though he walked with a slight limp. He walked at a brisk pace, didn't he?
Yes.
And he would carry what looked like shopping bags and swinging as he was carrying them, shopping bags in both hands.
I recall on a couple of times carrying bags. I don't recall him swinging bags.
On one occasion, did he get angry with you because you took him home and wanted to come inside?
Not angry.
Upset?
He was upset. He told me he would...
It wasn't part of the deal that you get to come in my house. That's what he said, wasn't it?
Right.
But you said he said it in a loud and aggressive and an irritating way, didn't he?
Sharp.
I mean, so the jury can understand that you had given him a ride to his house. Was it the house over on Avenue K?
Yes, sir.
2213 Avenue K?
Yes, sir.
It's a fairly well-kept little neighborhood, isn't it?
Yes.
Not high rent by any means, but nice appearing from the front. Low rent meaning not much money, but a nice-looking place, correct?
Yes.
And you did him a favor by driving him home.
I took him so we could pick up the eyeglasses. He was donating them to the Jesse tree.
And you started to get out and go with him.
Yes.
And he turned to you, "It's not part of the deal not to come in my house," something like that.
Yes, he was very sharp.
Now, there was a situation that occurred at the Jesse tree where Morris came and demanded to get the website that he had given you for these low-cost glasses, right?
Yes.
He became so demanding with the receptionist and the person, all these volunteers, aren't they?
Volunteers and employees.
That he became so aggressive and so upset with the receptionist began getting fearful and telling him if he didn't leave, she was going to call the police, right?
Yes, sir.
Slow down a little bit, Mr. Chestnut.
I'm sorry. I apologize, ladies.
Dramatic effect
ladies.
is good, but it's
Yeah,
a little
no,
too fast.
I know that. She's our hero, Your Honor. We
Okay.
appreciate her.
Be nice to her.
He's into this caution alert.
Pretty good. It concerned you that had happened, didn't it?
Yes.
In fact, didn't you seek out Morris Black and confront him? Maybe confront is too strong a word, particularly with your own personality. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way at all. Perhaps confront is too strong a word. You sought him out and you wanted to set some boundaries so that kind of conduct wouldn't happen again.
Yes, I saw him the following Saturday.
And what you told him was that you didn't want that kind of disruption occurring at the Jesse tree where you had your volunteers and your employees.
Yes.
Rather than apologize, he did not apologize, did he?
No, he didn't.
Now, were you aware that he did have some health problems and was getting treatment? In fact, even had an operation at the UTMB medical branch?
No, sir, I did not.
Were you aware that they had to physically remove him from there a couple of times?
No, I was not.
You're not surprised by that, are you?
No.
Were you aware that he, in fact, had to be tied down and restrained?
No.
With restraints because he was threatening people? That doesn't surprise you either, does it?
I'm not aware of the situation.
Now, I want to ask you this area about what Mr. Black said to you about someone who might help with your project. Actually, what he said was that he had met someone that he thought was very wealthy, right?
Yes.
He didn't tell you who it was, right? And didn't tell you how he had met him, or how he knew, or figured out that this person was very wealthy, right?
No, he never indicated if it was a man or a woman. He just said a person.
And you connected that with a short time later with Bob Durst coming. You didn't know him as Bob Durst, of course, but Bob Durst coming into your place with these kind of bizarre-looking glasses on with tape on them, you put those two things together.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Morris Black didn't tell you that whoever this person was that Morris Black thought had a lot of money was going to visit you, right?
No.
But in your mind, you thought that perhaps this person was going to test you, didn't you?
When the person asked me about services of Jesse Tree, I felt it was a test of how we provide our services.
You felt like it was someone kind of disguising himself, checking out your operation and testing you. That's what?
Yes.
And that's what you concluded from that, right?
Yes.
And that whatever was being said was a test, not as a person's actual personality, right?
Yes.
But you never spoke to Morris Black about that again, did you?
No.
And you don't know what Morris Black has said to Bob Durst, if he did, to get him to come in and test you like that.
No, sir.
Do you? Now, I had asked you once before when the last time you saw Morris Black was, the same time as this time when you sought him out for, as I have called, the confrontation, and told him you had to set some boundaries to some parameters to the way he treated people there. This was or not the last time?
It was not the last time.
So can you give us any idea when in the 8 months that you knew him from January until August this incident was where the receptionist wanted to call the police?
That happened in about May or early June.
After the glasses program, as you call it, was over?
No, he had donated the glasses to the Jesse Tree in about May, and the incident was he came in inquiring about how many glasses had been given and wanting the website, as you indicate.
So the incident where he came in and made a scene with the receptionist was after he had given all those glasses to the Jesse Tree?
Yes, sir.
And basically what he was doing was coming in to check on that program and got upset about it.
He wanted the website, and he got upset because I wasn't there to give it to him.
Let me ask it this way. Did it have anything to do with the service in Japan?
No, sir.
You didn't hear anything about that?
No, sir.
Okay. And what was the last time you saw him when you suggested that he try to seek some counsel?
No, sir.
Okay. When was that in the sequence of the 8 months you knew him when you saw him and he had these problems and you told him to seek counsel?
Once in the late spring, probably May, once in the middle of August. I saw him several times after that.
When you say you saw him, you mean you saw him around or you had conversation with him?
He came down to the clinic on Saturday morning, and so I had a brief conversation with him a couple of times after that.
Okay, I believe that's all. Thank you.
Could I approach the witness, Your Honor? The court replies yes. Mr. Hanley, earlier you testified that after Mr. Black had approached you about someone possibly being able to help you with money that was a couple of weeks later. Do you recognize this as your statement?
Yes.
I direct you to hear, and whichever is the direct answer. I just want to know, was it a couple weeks or a couple of days later that you had a visit from the defendant?
It was a couple of days later.
Okay. When Mr. Durst came to visit you that day, did you ask him for identification?
No, sir.
May I approach? The court replies yes. Do you recall when you gave this statement? Was it back in November of 2001?
Yes.
Let me direct you to this portion of the statement. Whatever the correct answer is fine, but does that refresh your memory as to whether or not you asked him for identification or not?
Yes, the receptionist had initially asked.
Just the answer.
Yes.
Why is it significant? Why do you have to ask him for identification?
It's part of the application process.
So you were preparing, in fact, to offer him something, were you not?
Yes.
And what were you preparing to offer Mr. Durst when he came to your Jesse Tree that day?
He asked for assistance with the gas, for gas money.
Okay, and what was your response to that request for money?
That we did not provide cash, that we provided vouchers.
And is it your procedures of not giving a voucher unless a person provided some form of identification?
Yes, we verify need and ask for an application.
And when you offered a voucher instead of cash, what was Mr. Durst's response?
He asked how long it would take to be able to get a voucher.
Okay. May I approach the witness again? The court replies yes. Again, directing you to the last page of your statement, specifically to this portion, you earlier testified, did you not, that this was an unpleasant meeting that you had with Mr. Durst. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you tell us what his response was to you when you informed him that he could receive a voucher?
He said, is this the kind of place that just gives you the runaround?
That's not what your statement says, is it, Mr. Hanley?
No, it was the goddamn runaround.
So, this is one of those goddamn places that gives you the runaround?
Yes.
And what was your response? Do you recall, or do you need to see your statement?
No, I responded that we didn't give people the runaround. We prevented them from having to run around by coordinating resources and getting the churches to assist people from our organization.
Is that what you were referring to when you were requested on cross-examination, when you thought might have been a test?
Yes.
Okay. Did he complete the application for a voucher?
No.
Did you at any time ask him to come back?
Yes. I suggested that he check back with me, give me some time to call the churches about a gas voucher.
Did he return or not?
No.
Pass the witness. The court asks any more questions.
It's the nature of, if I might put it this way, your profession, the business that you are in of helping people, that even when you felt you were being tested by a man that was being unpleasant with you and who used curse words, you told him to come back later and you would help him, right?
Yes, sir.
And while this was going on, you felt like this was a test of your patience, a test of what you did at the Jesse Tree, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
That's all. The court says anything further?
Did Morris Black ever share with you any type of fascination with handguns?
No, sir.
Did you ever physically threatened by Morris Black?
No, sir.
No further questions.
You can certainly understand how some people, without your sort of peaceful personality, might feel threatened by Morris Black and his demeanor and the way he treated people, can't you?
Verbally, yes.
Thank you, that's all. Court says anything else?
No, Your Honor. Thank you. The court says you are excused.
All right, Mr. Miata, thank you very much. Sit down. Mr. Miata, you have exhibits to mark?
Yes, Your Honor. There's a one-page stipulation for the exhibit for Ted Hanley's Galveston testimony, which we'd like marked for identification as People's 188. And there was one exhibit reference, which is Defense 19 in the transcript, which is now going to be marked as People's 188A.
All right, so we'll pick up with this tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, a reminder, it's a short day. We'll be here in the morning only. Do not converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, we'll get started. Have a good evening.